In today's episode, we're diving into one of the most controversial and mysterious spiritual movements to emerge from the early internet age, the Cassiopaean experiment. In the 1990s, Laura Knight Yaddick began publishing transcripts of alleged communications with an extraterrestrial source known as the Cassiopaeans. These messages, said to be received through a board-based channeling process, cover topics ranging from ancient civilizations and hidden history to metaphysics, timelines, and unseen forces influencing humanity. Over time, an online community formed around these teachings, eventually becoming the Fellowship of the Cosmic Mind and later evolving into the Quantum Future Group. Supporters describe the work as deep esoteric research, an effort to expose manipulation, decode higher densities of existence, and awaken human consciousness. But alongside the devoted following, serious allegations have surfaced. Former members and critics have described the group as exhibiting high control dynamics, alleging psychological pressure, social isolation, rigid ideological conformity, and an intense us versus them worldview. Others reject these claims entirely and argue that the community has been mischaracterized or unfairly targeted. And today we're joined by an ex-cult member, Todd, who has spoken and continues to speak publicly about his experiences, his research, and his perspective on this particular high-controlled spiritual group. Together, we'll examine the structure, belief system, leadership dynamics, and the broader question: when does a spiritual community cross the line into something more concerning? This conversation is about understanding influence, power, vulnerability, and the very real impact these movements can have on people's lives. As always, viewer discretion is advised. We will be discussing allegations, personal experiences, and controversial spiritual claims. Please approach this with critical thinking, compassion, and discernment. Let's begin. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Esoteric Atlanta in partnership with the Confused Wonder. And this episode is definitely a long time coming. If you are not subscribed to Todd, my guest today, then please make sure to go down into the description box below to subscribe to the Confused Wonder, especially if you like studying true crime and cults, especially when it comes to cults, especially when it comes to spiritual cults. Because that is basically what Todd is doing right now with his channel. Is he has got a huge project that he is undertaking, which is exposing Laura Knight Yaddick and the Cassiopaean cult. Now, a little disclaimer before we get into it. I feel like this needs to be said. We say this in almost all of our videos. We know that she is going to be watching this video, and we know that her minions are also, her flying monkeys are also going to be watching this video. As we say in almost every single video, we are aware that Laura and her minions, her flying monkeys, behave just like Scientology when it comes to people who speak out against them. We're aware of that. We also are aware of the fact that our names could show up in a channeling session. We are aware of that. We are aware, our business partners are aware that they could try to attack. And we say, bring it on, because we're not afraid of you. And we have taken lots of hits. And the truth is the truth, and the truth is coming out, and the truth is on our side. And none of her scare tactics, none of Laura's scare tactics, none of her minions' scare tactics are frankly going to work on us, right?
No, we've been through the worst.
We've been through it, and we're going to keep going because the truth is on our side.
Yeah.
So, Todd.
Yes.
I know a lot of people might not know who the Cassiopaean cult is because it is a small cult. It's an insidiously nefarious, evil cult. Kind of like Heaven's Gate. There's a lot of comparisons between the Cassiopaean cult and Heaven's Gate.
Yeah.
But with that being said, with any cult story, I think it's always important. People like to understand, I think, the psychology behind, because any person at any point can end up in a cult.
Right.
If they're vulnerable enough, if they're curious enough, And I think part of telling these cult stories, our friend Kelly Teal survived Nexium, got a lot
Yeah.
of Scientology friends. It's important for people to tell their individual stories because I think it humanizes people
Uh-huh.
to understand how this happens.
Right.
And it also educates people so that they know what to look out for, the red flags to look out for when it comes to these insidious, nefarious cults, especially with the internet, right? Especially
Yeah.
because that's where the Cassiopaean forum basically resides, mostly is on the internet. But
Yeah.
we're going to get into that for those people who don't know what the Cassiopaean cult. Don't worry, we're going to get into it. But I want to start from the beginning with you.
Okay.
So, where were you born? Let's
Born
go
in
from
Lakeland.
the beginning.
Born in Lakeland, Florida, 1972, and born into, my dad was in the military. He was in the Navy at the time. He re-enlisted in the Navy and eventually
Coast Guard, right?
joined
Oh.
the Coast Guard. Yeah.
That makes
Yeah.
sense. They're kind of similar.
Uh-huh.
And you're the youngest of three?
Youngest of three. I have two older sisters. Uh-huh. Yep. And, spent a life of moving around a lot. Moved from, I think it was Lakeland, Florida, born there. And then very soon after that, moved to Alaska. And that's where my most vivid childhood memories are, from Alaska. And, growing up in a really intense environment. And then there just lived all over the East Coast and even in Britain, lived in London. And yeah. So
This is really important for you because what the Cassiopean cult kind of revolves around is like almost extraterrestrials
yeah.
or aliens, as we would call them. And so, what was that like growing up on we know the psychology, which we're going to get to too, about moving every 4 years and how that affected
Yeah.
you growing up.
Uh-huh.
But you were a wild child. You had a
Yeah.
lot of energy. You were the youngest of three, the only boy,
Uh-huh.
and you were very rambunctious, and you
Yes.
grew up on these bases. And so,
Sometimes we lived on the base. Uh-huh. Yeah, not all the time, but sometimes we lived on military bases. Yes.
did growing up on these military bases, did that start your interest? Because you had some experiences, right, on these bases when you were a kid.
Yeah, so I had a lot of strange experiences as a child. You know, not being able to label them as a child as being paranormal, but definitely had some wild experiences. And it wasn't until I got older that I got interested in subjects of the paranormal and also UFOs and things like that. I had an abduction experience. I don't know if it was even an alien abduction experience per se, but it seemed like it was. And that sort of, as I started to do research into extraterrestrials and being abducted, that's when I looked back and said, wow, well, that experience that I had when I was like 12, 13 years old, that sounds like an abduction experience.
What was that experience? And where were you living at the time?
Miami, Florida, on a military base. Woke up in the middle of the night because of a bright light shining in my window. Or, I just woke up because of a bright light, didn't know what was shining in my window until I opened my eyes. And actually, it wasn't just shining through my window, as my whole room was illuminated. It was like everything in my room, including my clothes and my sheets, everything was glowing like an LED screen, but still had definition. And I had this, incredible feeling of just peace and well-being. And I was just sat up and I was just fascinated looking around at the room and looking at myself and just looking at this, extremely bright light coming in the window and still being able to gaze into that light without it maybe making me want to squint. It was just it was a strange experience. And as soon as I felt like I realized how crazy it was, because at first it was a shock, but then I started to gain my thoughts and awareness and realizing that I wasn't dreaming. And at that moment, I just sort of blacked out. And then my recollection was waking up in the morning and keeping my eyes closed and was praying that I was going to wake up in that situation again. But it just happened to be daylight shining in my window. And And then it wasn't until years later that I made this connection with the 2 nights before that happened. My mom came in my bedroom to wake me up in the morning and was getting after me because I was reversed in my bed. And so my feet were on my pillow and my head was underneath the covers. And my mom, and I remember it because my mom was getting after me, telling me that I was going to suffocate if I kept sleeping like that. And so it wasn't until years later that was something that commonly happens
To
with people.
abductees.
Yeah, to abductees, is that they would find themselves reversed. They would wake up and they'd be reversed in their bed. It's like this little um, alien abduction, I guess, practical joke. Instead of putting you in the right place, they reverse you and put you in there. Anyway, so that it was a very vivid experience. It's something that I still, when I think about now, I could take myself back to that situation and remember exactly how I felt and how the room looked and how everything went down. It wasn't a long experience, but it was a potent experience. And that's one of my earliest childhood experiences, I guess I could say. I had some experiences in Alaska. I remember smelling a Bigfoot and being with a Native American woman out picking berries with my mom's church group, and how this woman freaked out and told everyone, okay, she said it was a bear, but I know it wasn't a bear because of that smell. And it's exactly the smell and the feeling I had too. Like, it's hard to explain the feeling that I had as a child when I smelled that and saw the Native American woman getting really, really upset and telling everyone to rush off. We have to leave right now. And so there's that. And then just other random things that have happened.
So you're having these experiences, you're every 4 years, your family is up and moving
Yeah.
with the military to drastically different parts of the world with
Yeah.
drastically different weather.
Yeah.
You're there for 4 years, you get up, you pack up, and you move again. You're
Yeah.
having these paranormal experiences. You were also a very hyperactive kid. You were very artistically minded. You had a lot of creative energy.
Yeah.
And you've told me, so what was that like though? You've told me before, like I know from knowing you that you have a hard time moving. Like there's some certain things that you struggle with even as an adult because of the trauma of making friends and then being ripped away and moving. And then,
Yeah.
because back when you were a kid, when I was a kid too, there was no social media.
Right.
It was hard to keep in touch with people. So
Yeah.
how did that, did you like grow up feeling, on top of having these paranormal experiences, did you feel isolated? Like, was there a part of you that kind of felt lonely because every time you got to a new location, you knew 4 years and you were going to be going somewhere else?
It was hard for me to really settle in deeply into friendships, but I was able to make friends easily. I was just, I could really associate with anyone. I was good. I became really good at making friends as soon as I got to a school. It was sort of out of desperation of feeling settled, because sometimes when we would move in the middle of a school year. And I
Mhm.
would be, that out of place kid dropped off in class in the middle of the school year. Everyone, curious of who I was and where I came from. And so, that it didn't help with my education, and it didn't, but it gave me, a really strong sense of independence. Yeah, but also an ability to pretty much get along with anyone and to make friends fairly easily. But there wasn't the security. There was, talking to my other friends that lived in the same place for their whole lives. I had always envied that. Have the same friends throughout their whole life, living in the same area. And so that's something I always craved. And now moving even to a new neighborhood is sort of traumatizing to me.
Yeah, I know when my grandfather passed away, and my childhood best friend, still a good friend, drove up overnight to come to the funeral, and she walked with our family because she had been my friend my whole life.
Yeah.
And that's not something that you got to ever experience, was having that close knit community
Right.
because you were moved around so much. And I know before I want to touch on London a little bit, but I also want to, moving around so much for you, and this is an important part of the story. Your dad is from the Midwest, but your mom's family is super Floridian.
Yeah.
Let's touch a little bit before, because the one place that was home for you was always Nokomis, Florida, because that's where your mom's family, and not just your mom's family, but for generations had been in the Tampa, Sarasota, Nokomis area because of your 3 times great grandfather. And this is going to be very important to the Cassiopaean cult story. So let's touch a little bit on your heritage in Florida.
Okay. So my mom and my mom's, whole line,
Her mom,
family. Yeah. Her mom is from Nokomis, Florida. And that's where we would always come back to. So regardless of where we were living in the world, when we would go on vacation, at least once a year, we would come visit my grandmother, my mom's mom, in Nokomis, Florida. Beautiful area in Florida.
Sarasota County. So it's basically Sarasota.
Right. Yeah, Sarasota County. So my ancestors, Jesse Knight, Reverend Jesse Knight, that's who settled Nokomis, Florida, basically Sarasota County. What's that?
Tampa. There's monuments.
Yeah, Tampa. Monuments in Tampa. Yes. Yep. And so my ancestors,
mid 1800s, right? Like, or late 1800s.
Late 1800s. Yeah, they came down from. They were cattle herders, cattle farmers, I guess you would call it. Came down from the Valdosta area, so South Georgia, and was actually sort of running from the Confederates, I guess.
American Civil War.
Basically, Civil War, yeah. And so moved down into Florida and eventually stayed in Tampa for a while. And then there's a place called Knight Station in Tampa. That is where they set up camp. And then eventually moving down to Nokomis, Florida.
And that's where your parents still live. So you have a rich heritage in that area. In fact, every time we're down there, we always go by Jesse Knight's. That's your 3 times great grandfather. Now, Jesse had a lot of kids, which we're going to get into. But that was like, for you, like that was especially because you moved around so much.
Yeah.
That was really the only place that you would consider like home, right? Was like that area of Florida.
Yeah. And it wasn't until I got a bit older that I realized the significance of that area for me. That I realized, like, wow, yeah, I have memories throughout my whole life. In this one little section of the beach, not too far away from where my parents live and where my grandmother lived. Would bring back all these memories.
And it makes sense because, like, I grew up in Georgia, but my mom's family is big South Carolina, kind of the same thing as yours, but in the low country. And so I grew up in Georgia, but we would always go back and forth to South Carolina, to Charleston, and like my mom's parents were very big on like your Geechee or South Carolinian. Yeah. So I always felt like I kind of had 2 homes. Like, this was my heritage, but I grew up in Georgia. But for you, because you live so many different places where you never had that childhood like roots, right? This was really kind of that grounding force for you, was this area of Florida.
Yes, right. Throughout my life, and then also ancestrally, as well.
Yeah. No. Yeah. So at some point, your family ends up moving to London, and you were a teenager at this time, right?
I was.
Yeah, now, at this point, had your sisters already, because you're the youngest, had they already left home at this point when you were in London?
They had. Yeah. So I moved there alone with my parents. My sisters stayed back in North Carolina and Florida.
And so at this point, for me, this is really telling because, first of all, you're the only boy with 2 sisters who are the sweetest women in the world. Your sisters are great. Yeah. You're kind of babied by them. Like, your middle sister still kind of treats you like it's adorable, treats you like her little baby. Yeah. But then all of a sudden, you're hyperactive. Any kid who comes from a big family knows the youngest kid always kind of gets ignored. Like the youngest kid, my mom always tells the story, because there were 4 in my mom's family, that my Aunt Kathy, the youngest, that there was one day my grandmother lost Kathy and like couldn't find her anywhere and had to call. And finally some neighbor said, "Oh, she's at my house jumping on the trampoline." So the youngest, it's kind of notorious that the baby parents are very calm by the time the baby's around. So you kind of had a little, and you were a boy, let's be honest.
I pretty much got away with everything. They let me get, they just let me loose. And in London especially, it was my first experience of true freedom. With the underground, having, you know, an unlimited pass to the underground, being able to go wherever I wanted to, and no drinking age really. And
So
so,
you get to London. And this is a very pivotal time in your life because now you're the only child. Your sisters are gone.
yeah,
You're in London. You've discovered, is this where you discovered skateboarding?
I know I discovered skateboarding in Miami.
You became a very competitive, almost like competent skateboarder,
Yeah,
which back in the
it was my
80s,
entire life. I would live and breathe skateboarding. That's all I
so back
wanted
in
to
the
do.
80s, that was considered kind of fringe, right? To be a skateboarder.
I mean, I was actually getting really, really popular. I started at the very beginning of when it started to get popular, and back in the early '80s. And so no, but it was still fringe. I mean, it was sort of punk rock and edgy. And I found myself, it's a really cool places. I got to see more of London than my parents because I was always out with my friends skateboarding. One of the only skate shop in London happened to be in a basement below a world famous punk rock record store called Rough Trade. So it was Rough Trade upstairs, Slam City Skates downstairs. And I didn't even realize how significant that was until I got older and started really getting into music. And I was really into punk music at the time too. And so, you know, we'd spend time at the record store and then we'd go down and hang out at the skate shop and watch skate videos and see our friends and then go off to find spots to go skate. And it was just an incredible time for me.
And you're getting your independence. You're also in Miami because you lived in Miami before London. You
Yeah.
had been in this very hard to get into art school. Like you got into this like
Uh-huh.
art that a lot of actually
It was an art school that I had to take tests for, and it was a school for the gifted arts.
yeah,
So it had acting, it had dance, it had music, and then it also had its fine art side.
your visual art.
Right?
So
Yeah.
you got into this art school because you're an incredible visual artist. You can
Uh-huh.
draw, you make these masks and spirit boards now. Like you're very good with your hands.
Yeah.
You can be very creative. And so
Uh-huh.
you're doing this like skateboarding, you've got this art, you're now let loose in London. You have no siblings at home. And so it's just you and
Right.
your parents basically.
Uh-huh.
You've spent 4 years there. You're having these paranormal experiences. You're curious, right? You're around this time. I also like Scientology is coming around. And you told me you remember seeing the
Oh yeah.
commercials for Dianetics.
Uh-huh. Yeah. If I would have gotten hold of that book, I probably would have read it.
We'd probably be
It
talking
was
about
not.
it.
I grew up watching MTV when I remember the first video that ever came out. I remember when MTV was just the logo on the screen for a whole like month. I think it was just the logo. And I remember multiple times a day checking the channel just to make sure it hadn't come on yet. And so Scientology ads were constant on MTV from what I can remember. And then other channels as well. It was just the Dianetics was just they were at their height of pushing it on people back then.
And you're a teenager. You're coming into your manhood. You've kind of already found
Boyhood,
yourself.
boyhood.
Boyish manhood. You kind of figured out who you are. You're not a very traditional guy. You're very artistic. You're very different from the rest of your family. Your family's very
I was always the weird kid in school, so.
You're the skateboarder. I mean, if you guys go to his Instagram, I tried to pull up a bunch of pictures, but StreamYard wouldn't let me pull too many pictures. But you can see some old pictures of him skateboarding. And even when I met you 10 years ago, you were still skateboarding. Like even in your 40s, you only recently quit because you didn't want to break your hands so you couldn't do your job.
Right.
So you pretty much have continued skateboarding your whole life. And so you're kind of, you're going through London. You've already lived in Alaska, Miami. You've lived everywhere. And then all of a sudden, your father's contract in England ends.
Yeah, and he was working for some top secret thing. I still don't know much about it, but he couldn't look like he was in the military. He had to grow his hair out a little bit. He had to wear business suits. He went to an office building that had a false floor on it, that he had to have a special pass key to get in, and he worked inside of a big safe. Like it was a room with a big, huge, thick safe door. I only remember going there one time. I haven't asked him any questions about it, really. I don't think he could answer me. But for the Coast Guard, it just seemed sort of weird. Anyway, he didn't like the people that he worked with, and we ended up leaving after only spending a little bit I mean, maybe it was under 2 years, a little bit over a year. So we didn't spend a whole lot of time there, but I remember it was my favorite place that I had lived by that point. I mean, I enjoyed Miami, but yeah, London was really cool. I had such a good time there. I loved the underground.
And then you ended up back in Florida, right? Like, didn't your dad retired, correct?
He not at that time. We moved. That's when we moved from London back to Lakeland, Florida. Spent some time in Lakeland, Florida.
And we're going to move on, but I want to ask one question too, because obviously you're this curious kid, you're having these paranormal experiences, you like the arts, you're very aware of a spiritual world. I think most artists are. You're very aware that this is not, the world of nature isn't all that there is. Did you grow up, how did you grow up? What was your spiritual life? What was your parents' beliefs?
I grew up having to go to Methodist church.
That Jesse Knight also founded, correct?
Yeah. Yep. That Jesse Knight founded.
You told me a funny story where when you were like 12, you basically told your mom you're not going to church anymore.
Yeah. I was done with it. I hated it. I hated every minute of it. I'd rejected Christianity from the very beginning. Was never comfortable with it. Just made me really uncomfortable to go to church. And eventually, I think I would just complain so much, and I would sort of cut up in church and could stop moving around. And they eventually just were like, okay, you just stay home. You don't have to go anymore. I was like, thank God.
But God wasn't, you weren't questioning God. You just didn't like the structure of the church.
Right.
You're having paranormal experiences. You know, there's something.
Yeah. And after that light experience in my room, I don't know if you call it abduction experience, whatever. I'm not attached to it being an abduction, whatever that experience was. You could just call it paranormal, something, outside of my normal reference, of reality. I then got into I remember I don't know where I found it, but I found this book on astral travel, and I was trying to figure out how to astral travel. I remember telling my parents, because it had some little section about it's easier to astral travel if you're a vegetarian. I remember trying to become a vegetarian when I was 12 or 13 years old, and my parents threw a fit. I thought I was going to end up being malnourished, and so that sort of woke something up. That experience with the light of
curiosity.
Woke something up in me, a curiosity in me, and it wasn't reignited really to a full extent until years later, until I started doing psychedelics.
Well, let's skip first, because then you end up in Gainesville. You guys end up in Gainesville, Georgia. So we go from London back to Florida, and then you end up in Gainesville, which is north of Atlanta. Yeah. It's in the Appalachian Mountains. So talk about your experience, and because you had some paranormal experiences there as well. Also, you kind of sounds like you had a bit of a breakdown in Gainesville. This was a time for you.
I mean, it was tough transition to Gainesville. It was a small town. I went from a school that had, a big school in London that had 3 stories, tons
art
of
school
kids.
in Miami.
Yeah, art school in Miami. And then all of a sudden I end up in this little podunk town, in this little school that barely had 3 hallways. And so I was sort of fed up with sort of life at that time. Couldn't stand it there. And, eventually I made some friends and I settled in. I actually quit high school towards the end of my first year there, and met someone who talked me into going to a different school. And I ended up fitting in a little better there and finished high school barely by the skin of my teeth. And around that time is when I had some pretty major paranormal experiences around Lake Lanier.
Yeah, we've talked about Lake Lanier.
Yeah, you've done an episode on Lake Lanier.
Tell them just briefly, what's Lake Lanier?
Lake Lanier is a huge fake lake in Gainesville, Georgia. Tons of people live on it.
So many urban legends around it. It's one of the most dangerous lakes apparently in the world. A lot of people drown there.
Disappear. They can't find their bodies. It's a fake lake in the sense that they flooded a town when they made the lake. It's an enormous lake, and I was around. You can't help but be close to. Our high school was basically on the lake that I went to, and there's all sorts of crazy paranormal experiences. Actually, one of the most vivid paranormal experiences, aside from the one I had when I was in Miami, was right off the lake, driving with a friend, and we were driving down the road. It was like middle of the night. It was like 2 a.m. I don't know where we were coming from. We were driving and we were listening to this song that was on the Twin Peaks soundtrack. And I had this part where it was like this classical music and it built up and built up and built up. And then all of a sudden it sort of dropped off. And then right before the song was completely done, it had this huge like orchestra that came in and made this big boom. And it always shocked you. My friend had this big sound system and he was so proud of it. He wanted me to listen to this song. And so right when the music was about to end of that big scary moment of the big boom that was going to happen, right in front of our car manifested what looked like one of those dust devils. It was really big, but it was upside down. So the top was the narrow part instead of bottom being the narrow part, like a little tornado. But it was glowing, and it showed up in front of the car right at the time that the music was about to scare us. And then, so it manifested in front of the car, and the big boom happened, and we drove through it. And I remember my friend slamming on the brakes, and my hair was standing up, and we looked behind us, and it had just like disappeared. And it was just a really poignant moment. I still can't explain what
How
it
old
is.
were you at that time? What was your age?
I was probably 18. I was 18. I think we had or 19. Oh, between 18 and 19. I think we had just graduated our senior year. We were hanging out right after graduation, and so that had happened. And I remember I saw him like 15 years later. One of the first things we talked about when we saw one another. I was in Miami. I was in Boston, teaching in Boston, and he lived there and was working for a tech firm, and we hung out. And then one of the first things we talked about was that experience that we had, seeing that whatever it was. Yeah.
So in this point too, you also, as you've told me, you're a little depressed. You gained some weight. You were just kind of
drinking. I was partying a lot.
Yeah. And so you ended up in photography school. How did that happen?
I was just sort of screwing off after I graduated. I was really into like the bands like the Grateful Dead and Fish, but most of the Grateful Dead at that time. So there was a jam band, hippie band scene. And so, that's all I was really doing, was just sort of partying and going to concerts, going to shows. Would go to Athens, Georgia a lot to see random shows. And one day my dad just threw down a folder in front of me and said, "Here, I put you in photography school. You got to show up here in 3 months." And I mean, he knew that I always wanted. It was the one medium I hadn't worked in art, and they had a photography department at the gifted artist school I went to. I was always curious of what they were doing in there, and so that's why my dad enrolled me in photography school. That sort of helped turn things around for me.
Yeah, and you also you were doing a lot of psychedelics, and at one point you found a book on yoga.
Well, we have to back up just a little bit. So I had gotten out of photography school. I'd finished the 2 years of photography school. And, I started doing psychedelics early on.
Still does them, by the way.
Yeah. Started in high school. And right about when I graduated from photography school, it was the day before my 23rd birthday.
What year was this?
What's that?
What year was this for our friends watching, so they know what year? 95?
95,
96?
Yeah, 95.
95.
Yeah. And so going to a concert, I was following around this jam band called Fish, and it was like our 5th night following them around. So the 5th night we were going to a show. We were going in, and my girlfriend at the time wanted to do some mushrooms, and so we had bought some mushrooms in the parking lot. I didn't want to do them anymore. I'd already done them like 3 nights in a row before, and I was just like, I'm not gonna do any tonight. She had a little leftover in a baggie, like a little corner of the bag, and then she was like, "Here, I don't want any more. I don't want to throw these away. Here, you take it." I was like, "Okay, fine." I didn't think it was gonna do anything. Ate it, forgot about it, went into the show. Show started. By the second song, my friends were passing around a joint, took a couple hits, whatever, didn't think about it. But then all of a sudden, this huge, like, psychedelic wave had just like hit me. and overwhelmed me. I was just like, holy shit. Like it made me sit down in my seat, and I felt like I was going to lose my shit. And I had a couple of bad acid trips when I was younger.
Be careful with some words.
Okay. Anyway.
Be careful. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So had some tough experience, a couple of tough experiences before. I knew what it felt like when it was coming on. And I felt this feeling, this familiar feeling. And I was like, shit, are they going to have to take me home? Because it was so intense. I was sitting down in the seat. We were like almost front row. It was almost too much for me. The music was so loud. And I put my head in my hands, and I was just like trying to collect my shit. And all of a sudden I saw these two paths. I could either go like the freak out, which I had before in the past, or like there was this new route that had opened up. And it was like, I could just like let go and see what happens. And at that moment I let go. And it was like this hugest shift I had ever experienced in my life. It was like all of a sudden the world just opened up, and this weight had just lifted off of me. And it felt like the top of my head just opened up, and I was just one with everyone and everything. And it was like this enlightening experience, and I didn't even know what enlightenment was, and so I was like that for the next like week and a half. It just like cracked me open, and all of a sudden I had felt this like, I guess you just like this inner freedom that I had never felt before, and so soon after that, like a couple days after that concert and that experience, I was at a friend's house, and this friend had never done yoga. I don't know why he had this, but he had a book on yoga on this little bookshelf.
And guys, this is the 90s. Yoga was not everywhere.
No one did, especially in that little town, Gainesville, that I was living in. That was
the devil stuff.
Yeah, that was of the devil. Exactly. And so anyway, I had heard the word yoga, but I didn't know anything about it. And I was looking for just a shift in my life. I was a little overweight, probably like 210 pounds, and didn't really exercise. I had quit skateboarding at the time. It was a period of time where I sort of, was more into like going to concerts and doing psychedelics and hanging out with my friends that I was skateboarding. And so gained weight pretty fast, and just felt really stagnant and not a whole lot of direction in my life. And I was looking for something. I remember I had bought a mountain bike and was trying like mountain biking, and that did. I was like, that sucks. I'd rather be on 4 little wheels on a skateboard than a mountain bike, and so that wasn't working for me. But I felt like I needed something physical in my life, something new and something physical, but at the same time spiritual. It was really a spiritual yearning that I eventually identified. We're
gonna get to that, but that's what, the physicality of it all.
Yeah,
we're gonna get into that eventually.
Okay, so anyway, I picked up this book, and I remember opening it up, and there was a page or two on the benefits of yoga, and I was like, wow. After reading, I was like, wow. If the yoga practice would do that for me, I would do it every day. And from that point, starting the next day, for like the next 30 years, I did yoga. Yeah, because that book opened me up. So I took the book, I borrowed the book from my friend. I started teaching myself out of the book. Very soon after that, I was working for a photography firm, and I was doing some freelance work on the side. And someone had brought a magazine in that wanted some modeling shots done. And it was this guy, and he had brought in a Details magazine that had an article done by one of their freelance writers and photographers on going to India and studying with Pattabhi Jois. And I remember opening up that magazine, and the first page that I opened it up was this tattooed guy with his legs behind his head. And I was like, whoa, what is this? Because I just started teaching myself yoga like a month or 2 months before this. And then this magazine falls in my lap about this experience this guy has with this ultra traditional yoga teacher. Because there was no yoga studios or anything around, even in Atlanta, even in the closest city. No one had a yoga studio back then. And so this article was about this guy going to India to study with Pattabhi Jois, and immediately I knew this is what I'm going to do. From this point on, I'm going to do everything I can to end up studying with this guy. And then a year later, I was on a flight to India to go study with Pattabhi Jois. And I had never traveled alone before, never been on a plane alone before. Only time I'd ever been to another country was with my parents when we were in Europe and Great Britain and traveling around those areas, and just didn't know anything about where I was going really until I got there. I just had this man's address on a little scrap sheet of paper. Yeah. So that psychedelic experience that I had at that concert unexpectedly cracked me open and brought yoga into my life soon after that, and led to this whole life that I'm still living now.
So you end up getting authorized to teach. When you went there, you weren't even considered teaching. You just wanted to
I just
find
wanted
the
the
right
experience.
there, right?
Right. Yeah. I wanted my Kundalini to rise.
Who doesn't? You end up you'd moved to California, to San Diego with a girlfriend. I just want to clarify, guys, I am 11 years younger than Todd. So in 1995, I was 12. So these girlfriends we're speaking about are not me, because that would have been illegal at the time. So you're in San Diego, you're going back and forth, you're practicing with Tim Miller in San Diego. Guruji tells you to go teach. You go back to San Diego, and Tim Miller's like, "What are you doing?"
Right. Well, I was after, and so I was living with my girlfriend and saying, the girlfriend I met in Mysore, my first trip, extended trip, and then met her again on my second trip. Ended up moving to San Diego with her, studying with Tim Miller, which was one of the most prominent Ashtanga teachers at that time in America. And after we decided to go separate ways, I was really I really didn't like California. I was really craving getting back to the East Coast. And so when I was about to leave, I'd already been given permission to teach by Pattabhi Jois by the end of my second extended trip. That was right before I ended up moving to San Diego. And I was about to leave San Diego, and I was asking Tim, like, I'm going to move back to the East Coast. Where can I move to go study? Because I was wanting to study with another teacher. And he goes, no. Guruji, Pattabhi Jois told you to teach. Now you go back. You should go back to Georgia, and you should start teaching. And that's what gave me the impetus to start teaching yoga, because I wasn't into it to become a teacher. I just really enjoyed the practice.
I pulled this picture specifically, guys, because he manifested it. He became the tattooed man with the legs behind his head.
Right. Ashtanga was considered, like it still is, like the edgy,
it's still considered punk rock.
It's still considered, yeah. But more so back then.
Yeah.
People wimpified it a little bit these days.
And I was still playing with Barbies when all of this was going on, so I had not found yoga yet. That wouldn't come for me later. I did not meet. I mean, Todd is not the person who introduced me to Ashtanga. I found that on my own, and then we met years later in the practice.
Yeah.
But so you're in Georgia. You're building your business, which it's so hard to do, to build a yoga business. You have
So I moved from San Diego, came back shortly to Gainesville, living with my parents for just a little while, getting my shit together, and then pretty soon after that moved to Athens, Georgia, where REM and widespread panic.
You have been going to Athens for a while, and for people who are not from the state of Georgia, Athens is a very it's like an hour outside of Atlanta. It's like a very liberal, progressive. It's where the University of Georgia is, and it's also kind of even though there's a university there, it's also very bohemian. Yeah. REM is from Athens. Michael Stipe still lives there. REM is from Athens.
That's what you already said. REM, widespread panic, B-52s.
Of Montreal is from Athens.
Driving and Crying. There's a whole list. Athens is really a hub for art and music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can tell it's very bohemian when you're there. You feel it.
And not so much now as it was back then, especially when I was younger. It doesn't have this, what they call this towny vibe to it. It's a really unique sort of mixture of like this folk art mixed with this strange sort of spiritualism with the alternative music scene. And it's just, Athens just has its own thing going on. It's hard.
And then there's the University of Georgia, which is one of the biggest.
Right, which is pretty much totally taken. It's pretty much totally taken over now, University of Georgia. But back when I was first going there, and back in the late 90s throughout the early 2000s, it still had that vibe.
Yeah, University of Georgia is one of the better schools in the United States. One of the best veterinary school of medicine is, and that's when we lived in Athens, because my dad went to vet school there.
Yeah.
Yeah, Athens has got its own little historic district. Downtown's very historic, old Victorian houses, a lot of transient because of the school. So it makes sense to me. And I wanted to set that up because you would think, like, if you're teaching an alternative form of spirituality, you would obviously go to Atlanta, which is where we are now. But it makes sense that in the early 2000s, you would end up in Athens, because it seems like there would be a lot of alternative. Atlanta now is very edgy, but back then Atlanta was still a very small city with very Southern roots. And so you decided to go to Athens first to start teaching in Athens. You worked with a lot of, like, the graduate students. You taught at an old church, right? Or was it an old church you taught in? Or
yeah, that was the second place I taught. First place I taught was out of where I lived. I had this really cool spot. One of my close friends that the first person I lived with, I rented her attic apartment for a while, and she owned tons of properties in Athens, rental properties in Athens. And so she was really in touch with the market and stuff. And this cool church came on the market right down the street from where I was living with her. And she bought the church, and her boyfriend at the time was this incredibly talented carpenter. And he redid that church into her house. And behind that church, they have this thing called the Fellowship Hall, which was this really long building, one-story building with like 2 bathrooms on one end and then a big kitchen, and then this big open space with a fireplace on the other side, beautiful windows, dead-end street, really quiet, peaceful street. And I turned that space into a quarter of it into my living space, and then the other 3/4 of it into my yoga studio space. And so that's where I really started teaching. At first, I just taught privates. And then once I had enough private students and enough people interested in continuing their practice, that's when I started my first Mysore program. And that was in 1999.
And you had a lot of famous people coming in. You taught a lot of, so you really, and that's pretty impressive. All these years you've maintained a business. Like now AYA, we'll get to AYA, but now it's really, I mean, you have one of the busiest yoga businesses probably in the state of Georgia, but you've been very consistent, and you're the only person in the state of Georgia to have studied with Pattabhi Jois too. You were a young lad then, but now in 2026, you are considered a master senior teacher.
I think I'm still the only Ashtanga teacher that studied with Pattabhi Jois in the state of Georgia.
Yeah, I think I said, yeah. So you are now a senior you're an advanced master teacher now. You're very much sought after. People travel to practice with you from all over. But you even started, like, the universe really opened up for you to do this. This was definitely like a dharmic path for you.
Yeah.
But as what happens in spirituality is sometimes we get derailed. When did you
and this is after I got settled in Athens and I became really successful. I really got integrated in the community, had some incredible friends. One of my best friends owned the premier tattoo parlor in Athens, right next to the 40
You're
watt.
still good friends with him.
Right, yeah, still good friends with him. Right next to the 40 watt.
He's a conspiracy theorist like you are. So
yeah, we're like brothers. And so that's where all my work
comes from. All your tattoos,
is Watson. That's how we met, was when I first went in and started getting this piece. And it was his vision. I just wanted this little tattoo. It was like, wait, I got a better idea. Anyway, and so I had a really vibrant life there, teaching and practicing, and then would go out to all of these shows. My friends were musicians, popular musicians in Athens, and then my friend Watson owned a tattoo shop. And so I was having a great time in my life. I love Athens. I had such a great time in Athens during my, when I really settled down there teaching, and that's where I was introduced to the Law of One.
Well, I want to also back up just a little bit, because the difference between my journey in yoga and your journey in yoga, about 10 years apart from each other, because I am younger, is that when you went to India, Pattabhi Jois didn't speak much English. And with the English he did speak, he was limited, or
Yeah.
he would limit himself, right? Like, because he didn't want to answer too many questions, which is kind of the Indian way that you got to figure it out for yourself.
I mean, he was more of a shaman than a yoga teacher in a
Yeah.
sense. Yeah.
Well, basically, you know, and at this time too, you don't have many other resources, and so you started doing a lot of heavy seated meditation.
That came later.
They come later because I'm trying to figure out like where the loophole came.
Right. Yeah. So, so let's say, okay, so when I first started yoga back in the early 90s, I was reading a lot of, mainstream traditional yoga philosophy.
Well, it wasn't traditional. You weren't reading Yoga Sutras. You were reading like
no, I was okay, hold on. I was reading the Yoga Sutras, but also I was reading things like the autobiography of a yogi.
Yeah, like Yogananda stuff. Yeah.
The Sri Ramakrishna book about Sri Ramakrishna and his journey of enlightenment. Vivekananda. So books like that I would say were really accurate representations of the path of yoga as we know it now. Yeah.
They were their personal stories, antidotes of people's experiences versus actually the text, the actual like Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana.
And I read that stuff, but it was a little over my head at that time, I would say.
Also,
to make it fair, nowadays we have so many resources available to us online. Back in the early days, yoga was so fringe. I would have conversations about yoga while I was in India with fellow students, but it was mostly revolving around just the practice we were doing, the physical practice we were doing, and trying to figure things out about Pattabhi Jois, because he was such a character. He was such he had this shamanic approach where things weren't explained. It's 100% traditional. When you understand the 100% traditional Indian yoga, it's so far removed from our understanding of yoga now. Yeah.
Oh, it's very different. And I was very lucky because I always had like coming along 10 years later with David Garrigues, who was one of he had done a lot of philosophy studies. So he introduced me to Prakriti and Purusha.
And he was able to explain it. He was able to explain it in a way that a Western mind could understand it. See, back in the days where I started, it wasn't necessarily like that.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Because like I knew from the beginning that the practice, the physical practice was the meditation.
Right.
That it was the exercise. Hatha yoga basically means exercise. That it brings your body into your mind and it focuses you. You have to be miserable. You have to get to that point where you're challenging the yoga, chitta-vritti nirodha, the prakriti, purusha. So that's the difference between our journeys, which is significant because that does play a part in the Cassiopaean cult later on.
Right.
Is our two perspectives when we met of yoga were very different because I was coming along, your generation crawled so my generation could walk.
Right.
Exactly.
Right. Yes. Because it's in all different aspects, even from the asana, the practice aspect, we were crawling. That's why they call it the Ashtanga Yoga Research Institute. When I was
research, and I was at the yoga institute. It was already just instituted by the time I came. There was no more.
Yeah. So we were like we were in a sense, we were like the guinea pigs.
Yeah. For Westerners.
We were having to figure things out. Like David Garrigues and myself having to figure things out, so then we could more clearly offer it to people and say, this is what it isn't, and this is what it is. And I did a lot of what it isn't,
which is what brought you to the Cassiopaean
understanding of what it is. And so mistakes are going to be made. Vivekananda put it this way when I remember reading back in the early days. He put it this way: he was like, yoga is going to do one of three things. It's either going to make you go mad, or you're going to lose your life because of it, or you're going to end up waking up. And I went through pretty much all three of those things to get to where
I think I actually just stayed on the waking up path, but it was because I had really good teach. Like I had
because the early teachers did the front end. We did the front end work
so that my generation could walk.
And it's interesting that it's come full circle that you helped me wake up out of something that I was stuck in, but we'll get to that.
Well, that's why we're setting it up. So you almost like at this point, you're doing this crazy practice. You're on your yoga mat 2 hours a day. You're thin, you're buff, but you're still chasing something because you had not quite grasped the whole Prakriti Purusha thing, that the magic of the spirit was happening in the body, in the practice. You were under the assumption that the practice was preparing you for like seated meditation.
Exactly, right. And that was a common thought. And that the asana practice was there to prepare your body for a seat. Because at the time we thought the definition of asana would be any posture that you could comfortably meditate in. But now my understanding,
that is the definition, but it's
no. I mean, no. This is I was thinking just recently a good way to explain this is that actually asana is talking about a comfortable place that the soul can rest in
while the body's miserable.
Exactly. So when your body is miserable enough through doing physical activity to the point the ego goes, fuck this, I'm out of here. Mm-hmm. And then the soul comes in and it has a comfortable place to sit.
Yeah, it breaks your ego.
That's what they're talking about when they talk about asana being any posture that's comfortable for the soul to sit in.
And that's why why marathon runners have always fascinated me. Like our brother-in-law, Steven, he runs like 50 miles. He does ultra marathons, running like for 10 hours straight. Nobody does that for their health. Like that's his spiritual practice.
Right. Someone had commented that her dad, when he would go out for a jog, said, I'm going to go talk to God.
Yeah,
he would go on a 15-mile jog, and towards the last probably 3 miles, he was communicating with God because the ego left.
And now
because the soul had a comfortable place to sit.
Because that aggression in the mind, and that's the Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. So, and also I will say too, so Pattabhi Jois passed away in 2009. His grandson, Sharat, who is Todd's friend, my teacher, he speaks perfect English, Sharat.
Yeah.
And he did a lot. I will say he did a lot to correct that. Like there were many conferences I sat in India where people asked about seated meditation, and Sharat would be like, absolutely not. Like, do not do that.
And another thing, and Pattabhi Jois never taught seated meditation.
No.
Never talked about it. And that should have been a hit. See, with the traditional teacher like Pattabhi Jois, sometimes it's what they don't say that's more important than what they say. Yeah.
It is literally just move your body.
Right.
Put your hand here, put your foot here, breathe, and then you have this spiritual experience. And we're gonna, I'm focusing on this for a reason because it's gonna come back again later on. But I just want you guys to know that. So you were like chasing this. Whoops. You were chasing the dragon. You were like looking, even though you had the perfect recipe.
Right.
It was almost like, and I think that's what gets people when we, especially on like fusion body, it's very simple. Like spirituality is very simple. Yeah. You just got to be human. You just got to you got to sweat. You got to breathe. That's it. You can't be, we're not in the realm of enlightenment. If you think you're enlightened, if you think your Kundalini has risen, you're the furthest person from enlightenment. That's basically just be messy, be a human. That it's simple as that. It's so, spirituality is so simple. And I think sometimes, especially for us Westerners, it's too simple. There's got to be a catch, you know? And so you went on this journey. Now, you always were kind of a conspiracy theorist growing up in the military. You never quite trusted the government, rightfully so.
Never trusted the church or organized religions. I knew that.
Or organized education. You have an IQ that's through the roof. You have a very high IQ, but you never trusted school.
Yeah.
And you told me once, I loved it, that the original yogis, like if you read Patanjali Sutras, these were the original conspiracy theorists. They're like, something's not right. Like, how come we live in these bodies that die? Like, what's going on? Like, this obviously is illusionary.
I mean, they're the original ones that said we live in a matrix.
Yeah, that's basically what the Yoga Sutras say. We live in a matrix. You got to play the matrix. You got to be in the matrix, but that's what this is. Your soul is real. Your body and your personality is not. Right. So you are already kind of on this conspiracy theory.
Well, and also when I was living in Athens, 9/11 happened. And that's that.
You can't say that.
Okay. Well,
I gotta get the time. I gotta mute that. That will get the channel shut down. The event of 2001.
Yeah, the event of 2001 happened, and that was my, like wake up moment. Immediately, I was like, "This is not right," and that really turned me into the conspiracy theorist, legitimately, you know. And around that time, same time, again, a book fell in my lap. Had never been turned on to any of this stuff before, but one of my friends was actually heading off to his first trip. One of my students was heading off to his first trip to Mysore to study with Pattabhi Jois. And he was like, here, I got all these books. I have nowhere to put them. I don't want to put them in storage. You might be interested in some of these books. I was like, cool, okay. And so I stored them at my place because I had that big place. And one day I'd run out of stuff to read because at that time I read a lot of books. I was constantly in a few books. And I found the first volume of the raw material. And I was like, what is this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the raw material is great. We love the law of
raw material.
Yeah,
and
otherwise known as the law of one, which is what I usually call it on my channel.
And it was just blowing my mind.
So give us a background, like what is the law of one, the raw material, for people who've never heard about it?
It's channeling, and I still think that 99.9% of all channeling out there is bullshit. But I just happened to be introduced to like the OG, the good stuff. And it was an experiment that a man named Don Elkins did. And it was a continuation of research he was doing for the prior 25 years with people that had been put under hypnosis, that had past life experiences that came up that seemed to be either remembering abductions or living on another planet at another time. And they were talking about their experiences. And then that sort of merged into him doing some research in people that felt like they had this telepathic connection to some other spiritual realm. And so that was his first part of his work. And he wanted to refine that. He was started thinking, well, if these people have these random experiences with these, whether they be extraterrestrials or higher density beings or whatever, maybe I can set up a situation as an experiment and controlled situation, and we could like contact these beings. And I guess he'd also had his own experiences. And so they had set up this situation and actually contacted someone that came to him, and they called themselves Ra. I mean, now we know that Ra is actually the vibrational frequency of 6 density. And it was really Don Elkins that contacted the group that he was from, because he was a wanderer, and that he didn't even need Carla Ruckert, that he was actually, a lot of the time, Carla Ruckert wasn't even talking. It was actually a voice that was manifesting within the room, and they were channeling these beings. And so they gave us what the raw material was they gave us the like cosmology of spiritual evolution.
Prakriti.
Yeah, right. The understanding of Prakriti on all levels, from the moment that we exit the creator as individualized beings till we get back
to the creator.
Emerge back with the creator. And so it fit really well with my studies in yoga. It was like, wow. And it was put in different terms. It was so intriguing to me, because I was like, wow, it gives me an opportunity to step away from the structure of Hinduism that yoga existed within. It was hard. It was, in a sense, it was sort of hard to, it could be separated, but at the same time,
now it's easy to separate it. But
now it's easy, but at the time it wasn't so easy to separate it. I was going to India and existing within.
And I enjoy it. I think Hinduism is a beautiful religion.
It's absolutely beautiful. Yeah. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but for me, it was cool and it was refreshing, because I was so inundated with the Hinduism along with the yoga that I was like, wow, here's it. It's expression, but put in totally different terms.
And like a Western perspective.
Western perspective, but it was so universal, and it filled in some blanks that I had questions with. And so I ended up reading all the books and actually really sort of studied. I sort of stepped away. I moved away from studying yoga.
You're still practicing, though. You're still doing your practice.
Daily practice, teaching. My heart was still in yoga, but my study now had shifted. And so I was studying the raw material, practicing every day, started to meditate, doing the regular meditation, which I should have never gotten into, but I did. And also, along with that, it opened me up to start doing more study into conspiracy theories.
Well, I want to back up a little bit for people that never have heard, because this is really important, because Laura stole a lot from the Law of One, which came long before Laura. We're in third density. Basically, the Yoga Sutras is as a manual on how to survive third density. Third density is where all of us are. It's the density of choice. After that comes fourth, where it splits: service to others, service to self, positive, negative polarity to fifth to sixth. So you're going to hear STO, STS in the Cassiopaean cult, but that comes from the Law of One. That's not Laura's thing. That's from the law.
The whole foundation of terminology used in the Cassiopaean experiment came from the Law of One.
Yeah, it's not the Cassiopaeans.
That's where 90% of the vocabulary that's used is Law of One.
And I don't know if a lot of the people in the cult realize that.
And even, let me tell you this, and even the background that Laura claims to have, it's actually, a lot of it is stolen from Don Elkins. If you go read Secrets of the UFO, which was the precursor to the Law of One material, you can see where she gets these ideas from. And a lot of people, she never talks about that book.
Yeah,
because if you went back and you read that book, you would go, "Oh wow, this sounds
interesting.
This research sounds familiar." Because I just actually pulled the book out yesterday just to refresh my memory. I was like, "That's interesting," because Don Elkins said that he did 25 years of paranormal research before he started his project with the raw material. Who else says that?
Yeah.
He talks about all the research papers he read and all the books he read and the studies that he did. And I was like, that sounds awfully familiar. So anyway,
before we get to you're interested in conspiracy theories. You're having these, kind of awakening with the practice. You're also doing a lot of seated meditation, which is never good for you guys. You should never do seated meditation. That's not what. That's not
years to realize that. But I was having experiences with that too. Come to find out, it was
so. As is said in the Emerald Tablets, Thoth says this, that you'll be on the correct path, and all of a sudden the ego gets enticed, but subtly. But before we do that, before we introduce you to now you meet the Cassiopaean cult, we're going to take a moment for a brief break from a word from our sponsors, guys. If you're really interested in what we've been talking about, if you've never heard of spirituality being exercised, Fusion Body Studio might be the place for you. What we've done is we've taken traditional teachings of yoga and we've put them into more modern exercises. And hold on for 1 second, guys, because here's a special discount code you can use if you want to give it a try. Guys, you are missing out, because one of the hardest workouts you will ever do is probably the workout that you've been overlooking. Welcome to Bar for Men at Fusion Body Studio. Yes, that's right. Bar designed specifically for men. You see, Bar has a reputation for being a predominantly female workout, but here's the truth. It's one of the most brutally effective strength and endurance systems you will ever try. Tiny controlled movements, isometric holds, slow, deliberate burn, and zero momentum to save you. Your legs will shake. Your core will be on fire like never before, and you will sweat a lot. This isn't about light weights and easy stretches. This is about deep muscle activation, balance, stability, and mental toughness. It hits those small stabilizer muscles that most traditional gym routines ignore. And that is exactly why it works. And here's what makes Fusion Body Studio different. We are the only studio intentionally catering to men in the space, creating a welcoming, ego-free environment where guys can train hard, get stronger, and challenge themselves without feeling out of place. Former athletes, lifters, runners, busy dads, they're all discovering the same thing. Bar builds lean muscle. It improves mobility. It protects your joints. And it humbles you in the very best way possible. And women, well, we love it too. The energy shifts when men show up committed, focused, and ready to work. It becomes powerful, balanced, motivating. So if you think Bar isn't for you, that might be exactly why you need it. Try Bar for Minute Fusion Body Studio today. Use Bryce20, BRICE20, all caps at checkout to get 20% off your first 6 months. Remember, strong is strong, and control is power. And that shake, that's growth. We'll see ya at the bar. All right, you guys, you get to see Todd doing something other than yoga. Join us. You get the first 7 days for free to try it out, but we're having so much fun. And I take all of the information that we're talking about now with spirituality and I make it more accessible for Westerners specifically. Because you don't have to do yoga asana. You don't have to put your legs behind your head to have the experience. And so we're making it more, we do have an Ashtanga section there, but we have other things as well. So where do we leave off? So you're in this weird space where you're teaching, you found the law of one, you're into conspiracy theories, you're still, I don't know if you're confused.
Well, no, I'm not, I wouldn't say I was confused yet. Like, not fully confused. And also, if I understand that back in the early days of the internet, conspiratorial stuff, was still new. I mean, there are people out there putting books out about it for years, but I wouldn't say that it hit like mainstream until like the early 2000s on the internet. And those were the heyday. That was the heyday where you could actually get on Google
and find stuff. It wasn't
find stuff. And I've deep websites where you could go and, see all dark side of the moon stuff and really any conspiratorial subject you could think of, you could find websites dedicated to it that was completely uncensored.
Chat rooms, all sorts of stuff.
Right. Yeah. And so I would say that I was like sort of, one of the OGs back then doing that sort of research. And so it was really fascinating to me.
So when did you find the Cassio? So it was because of the law of one that you found the Cassiopaeans, correct?
Sort of opened me up to the Cassiopaean. So I think at the time I'd already read the raw material. I think I'd read the books at least 3 times over. First time I read it all the way through, went back, read it all the way through again, and I went back and started reading it again. And somehow, and I don't even remember, this is the thing, sometimes books just sort of fall in my lap and I don't recall like how I came across the book. I think I was either on the web looking for something, or I ordered one of the raw material books, maybe for a friend. I bought another copy, and there was an ad within. Like sometimes they put these little cards in the book when they send it, and there was an ad for ordering one of books for the Wave series, and I was like, oh, this sounds cool. I'm gonna check this out, because I was craving more information, like the raw material, because the whole raw material thing was done. Don Elkins had already passed away. No more channeling was going to happen with raw, and so I was craving for more of that. So then I got the first book of the Wave series. And
this is the second book, but yeah, it looks like this.
Yeah, and it was fascinating. I felt like
here's the Wave.
Yeah, I felt like it was in a way an extension of the raw material, but it was starting to go into things that I felt like the raw material was lacking, and that was the dark side. What the service to self side, higher densities were up to, and why they would be manipulating and meddling in our third density. And so I felt like, this is cool. And also, at the time, I was into conspiracy theory, and so there was sort of a mix of that. It was where those two started to come together, and so I feel like that's how I was drawn in to the Wave series. Now, looking back, I see that I was a little naive, because this is in my mid-20s. And I don't think I didn't have the same discernment that I have now. So I would say, we were talking about this recently, that if I were to have started the Wave series over now, knowing what I know, I would have been able to see through a lot of Laura's.
So let's go back and who are the Cassiopaeans? For people who don't know, they've never heard of the cult. What is the Cassiopaean cult group?
The way they explain it, or the way I know it?
Just generic.
Generic.
Yeah.
It's channeling, and the way that it's different from the raw material. Raw material was trance channeling, and the Cassiopaean experiment, as they call it, is all done with channeling on a spirit board or a Ouija board, which I do feel is the best way to channel, the clearest way to channel, safest way to channel, if you want to call it safe. Yeah.
If you can actually, and that's her, that's the cult leader.
Yeah, and so, but before Laura, the person who started the channeling was Frederick Ireland, which Laura really doesn't like to talk about. And she does talk about Frederick Ireland. She talks about how he was, this corrupting force, but he was the one who was channeling the Cassiopaeans. Laura, as Lou puts it, it's like a weekend at Bernie's. Laura, when she took over, when Frederick Ireland left, and Laura sued Frederick for the rights to the Cassiopaean experiment or the transcripts, Laura has just been pushing around a planchette and not really talking to anyone, in my opinion.
Well, let's back up. Okay, so what do the Cassiopaeans believe? Who are the Cassiopaeans? What do they believe? What is this group? What's the moral compass of this group?
Well, shit. I mean,
just generically, not
generically. They claimed, or Laura claims, that there's also six density higher beings that are communicating with us. But as we know, if you go back at the beginning sessions, they're actually fourth density service to self beings that are talking. Now, with that being said, it's not that you can't get anything out of channeling fourth density service to self beings. You got to be really careful. You got to understand where there is manipulation there, but they can't lie.
No, they can't lie. But beyond that, like, what is the structure of the cult, of the organization?
That's hard to explain. The structure of the cult.
So Laura channels.
Laura supposedly channels the Cassiopaeans, and then she in turn interprets what the Cassiopaeans are saying. And so the reason why it's a cult is because Laura has put herself as a leader, and she's the only one who can define what it is the Cassiopaeans mean through the things that they tell her, or really us. And she claims to be channeling herself from the future. So there's this.
So she claimed basically what's going on is Laura has this group, and they have a forum online now. And for 32 years now, they ask all these questions about conspiracy theories, Knights Templar, and they're getting these answers from the Cassiopaeans.
Right.
And they post them on the group. Laura writes articles. But even when I met you 10 years ago, this is one of the first things you talked to me about. When you're on the forum, you can't question Laura.
Right.
You can't question it. They start to, the Cassiopaeans will say someone's, like the Scientologists will call a bad person an SP, a suppressive person. Cassiopaeans will call them an organic portal.
OPs, yeah.
OPs. So when I first met you, when you first told me about the Law of One, I really resonated with the Law of One. And then you started telling me about the Cassiopaeans, and you would even say to me, but I mostly pay attention to the Cassiopaeans now because it's ongoing. And you were very kind of venerated Laura, that Laura was this really spiritually enlightened person.
That she had all these paranormal experiences. And I want to go back a little bit. So we were talking about my ability to discern when I first read the books. Now, I read the first 3 books. Really, I paid more attention to her story about in the first 2 books. after I read those first 2 books, or while I was reading those first 2 books, I didn't really question. I was like, okay, I'm going to take this person's word for it that she had these experiences, and these experiences led her to channel the Cassiopaeans. And yeah, this guy Frederick, or Frank as they call him, must be, this crazy loony guy who caused all these problems. And I was taking her word for it as I was reading the books, and not having gone through a lot of my own dark night of the soul experiences and things like that. I just said, okay, yeah, she's done the work. I just assumed that's fine, accepted that. I was really in it for the actual channeling. So after the reading the first 2 books, many, many, many years ago, I really sort of forgot the details about her story, because I would just, all the further books, I would just go in and just read the channelings. And sometimes I wouldn't even read her the way that she would describe what she thought they meant. I would interpret it for myself. And so I sort of put her aside and just said, okay, I'll just trust this person. And I just focused on the books. I spent a little bit of time in their forum, but it was sort of toxic, and I really didn't have the time or energy for it, so I didn't care. I never read anything on their website aside from the transcripts of the channelings. And there is where I made the mistake. I didn't discern enough. I wasn't interested enough in who the person was and who the person was claiming to be. And I didn't start looking into that until you brought that up.
Well, I want to get to that. I want to get, because I want to go back, because now this is where I kind of enter your life.
Right.
So I meet you. You had just gotten divorced. You were in a abusive marriage.
Yeah.
I had come out of a terrible relationship. I had spent a lot of time in India. I kind of met you by chance. I was looking for a place to practice in between my trips to India. Was not looking for a relationship. Before I even got there, I kind of already thought I'm going to have her assistant teach here too. So we kind of got to know each other. We started dating. And you introduced me to things like the I Ching and the law. We go on these long walks, and I knew you were very fascinated in aliens. I've never been super fascinated in aliens. I was more interested in because I had a lot of paranormal experiences myself. And I knew that you really had a lot of UFO experiences. So we talk about that. Then you started talking about the law of one. And I really resonated with the law of one. I thought that's incredible. Like, now we have more of a template for Prakriti, for the nature, the experience of the soul as it goes through its different evolutions, as it refines itself. And then you started telling about the Cassiopaeans. And I thought it was interesting because I never really read the transcripts. You would just tell me things like, well, this is what the Cassiopaeans say about this situation and that situation, blah, blah, blah. And then you would talk to me a lot about Laura, and you would say, because I had all these spiritual things happen to me, attacks, and you'd say, Laura this and Laura that and Laura this, and I would just take it. And then at some point, you kept telling me you should read the Cassiopaean experiment on your channel. So I started doing that. So you say, I got you out of the cult. You actually instigated you getting yourself out of the cult. Because as I started, and my people that have been watching, I still have it up, the Cassiopaean experiment. Anybody who's been with me for a while knows I started reading those things on live air, and I was horrified by what I was reading.
I remember you used to
fucking horrified. And I'm on a show, and I'm trying to maintain my cool and my calm, and I started calling Laura out because I realized, this is considered a spiritual cult. There's nothing fucking spiritual about it. It's just gossip. Conspiracy theories aren't spirituality. And so I started talking to you. I'd be like, but Todd, this isn't. He was like, but she's done all this work. I was like, what work? What work?
When I said all this work, I was going by my memory from over 20 years ago of reading it. Just thought I had a picture of whatever work she did. But then when I went back, after you would come out and we would have these discussions, and I would sort of push back. Finally, I went back and I started doing the research, and I was like, "You're absolutely right. This doesn't."
Let's back up a little bit too, because I was going through the first book of 1994, and I would do some readings, and I really liked Frank. Really liked Frank, as they call him in the book. And I got a positive response from my audience too. Whenever Frank did it, whenever he was the soul channeler, it was very different than when Laura was there. And the stuff he's in the channeling resonated with spiritual growth. That it mirrored the sutras. It mirrored the law of one. It was very encouraging. Like, yeah, it's tough here, but it's tough for a reason, because you're doing fine. You signed up for this. You got to go through these, and Laura, though, in between, she has these little writings, and every time it was like a solo Frank, she would always apologize. And I was so confused, because I'm like, why is she apologizing? This is the most brilliant channeling in this book, is Frank's. And so I'd come up and I would say stuff to you. I'd be like, this Frank guy is amazing. Like, his stuff is really potent. And you're like, oh no, Frank's a bad guy. You would say that to me. Frank, he was like actually a government spy, and you tell me all this stuff, and I'm like,
I don't think I said that, but anyway.
You said a COINTELPRO, whatever. Like,
I don't think I said that either.
But you did. I remember we were standing in the kitchen. You absolutely said that, and that he was being controlled by the Lizzies, the service to self. And I'm looking at you, and I'm like, well, if he's being controlled by a service to self, then so is every good person on the place of planet. Because this guy is like gentle. I was like, he gets it.
Right. And I don't remember, and I didn't hear what you were, I don't remember his separate channel. I still need to go back and look at that. So, I mean, I understand where you're coming from now, but at the time, I just had this vague recollection of what was said when I read.
You believe the propaganda.
What's that? I did. And what I had read 20 years ago. And so there was this, I was 20 years removed from that. And you helped to remind. It
was tough though. We had a rough ride there for a minute.
We did until I went back and started looking for myself, and that's when I realized, because now I have the discernment that I didn't have before, and it just took me recollecting or being reminded by going back and looking at it, going, "Wow, I didn't see this. I should have looked closer into that, and I didn't." And you're absolutely right. Your fresh perspective, bringing that to me, there was a struggle there, but that helped me to wake up. And I woke up really fast after I saw it, after you like put it in front of me, and I saw it.
Well, and the reason too, you also encouraged me to read the Cassiopaean experiment on my channel, which is what started your waking up, was that let's go back a little bit, because we were, as we said, you are a descendant of this guy, Jesse Knight. He's your 3 times great grandfather, and he had the Methodist Church in Nokomis, and they were doing renovations, and your father grabbed some of the pews, the old pews.
Church pews. The church pews that my dad grabbed were made out of the wood that the first church Jesse Knight built. It was reclaimed for that church. That church ended up getting blown down in a hurricane. That wood was reclaimed, made the choir pews that were existing in the church for all those years until they redid the church a handful of years ago. My dad got me one of those church pews. I brought that church pew to my yogashala and started to clean it up. And while I was cleaning it up, I saw an interview that was posted on YouTube of Laura, and was like, oh, I'll listen to this interview, because she didn't do interviews back very often. I was like, oh, I'll listen to the interview on Laura as I clean this church pew. Anyway, 10 minutes in the interview, she talks about her ancestors settling the same area my ancestors settled in, as I'm cleaning a church pew from our mutual ancestor. And I was like, holy shit, Laura Knight and I are related.
She's a Knight. You're second cousins.
Second cousins. Yeah.
And even your mom had been in contact with her. Like your mom knew her. And she looks just like your mom, and they're identical.
And so I had been reading the Cassiopaean material, experiment stuff, for all of these years, 20 years, never realizing that she was my second cousin. And
so that actually, I should have started with that, because that actually, from my perspective, sunk you deeper into the programming of the Cassiopaeans.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, wow.
Locked you into this. And you sent her an email, and she emailed you back. And I remember reading it and being like, that bitch, she was so rude to you. And I'm in contact with some of my second cousins. I've gotten some emails since my channel got big. And I know that's like, you're like, oh, like this person has a big channel. I'm related to her. I'm so nice. I love when my second cousins reach out to me. That's cool to me. Like have, and then she wanted to know about my lineage because you talked about like I'm Queen Victoria's 5 times great granddaughter, me and thousands of other people.
Yeah.
And she was asking for some stuff that we have, and I felt very uncomfortable about, for some reason. This is before I started reading it on my channel. I was really nice to her, but I felt extremely uncomfortable. Like my gut was like, do not send her anything from
Yeah.
your family.
Right.
And you kept trying to bug me to contact my mom's cousin. My first cousin once removed to get these like letters. And I kept putting you off because I did not want to do that. Like I did not feel comfortable. I know who I am. I know what I don't need Laura's approval. I know my lineage.
Right.
Sorry, I'm looking for the mute button, guys. I'm getting over bronchitis. Sorry about that. I was looking for the mute button.
Yeah.
Poor Todd has to lay beside me all night as I hack a lung up. I was and that kind of caused some issues. You're like, no, you need to send. I was like, I'm not doing it. I'm not going to send her. There were some issues between us because I didn't want to do it. I did not want to send her private family information. I did not feel comfortable doing that. But it locked you deeper.
A little bit. Yeah, it did.
That connection with her, all of a sudden, it was like you got sucked back in. You told me at some point you tried to post on the forum, but people got mad at you. Like it was very toxic on the forum. But then that's when you need to start reading this on your channel. And besides the whole Frank thing, the first thing I noticed was Laura was that she definitely has a behavior problem. Like that was the very first thing I noticed reading. And I was reading these transcripts day after day after day after day. So I was getting a long dose of it. And I was like, this woman, who raised her? Like she has no manners. Yeah. As my mother would say, she has no couth. She definitely has behavior problems. Yeah. Big time behavior problems. And I would come out and say something to you. I'd be like, she's not like, and you'd be like, oh, well, she might be brass. And, you don't know the struggles she's been through, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, no, bro, like she's mean. Like this is a cruel person. And then I noticed she was getting shit wrong. Like she got things really wrong about about Hinduism. Yeah. And the Cassiopaeans didn't correct her. And I was like, that's weird. That's suspicious. Like, this is obvious. Anybody who's spent even a lick in India knows that what she said was wrong. Yeah. Factually wrong. Right. So why didn't these sixth density beings say, actually, that's not, you need to go study that. That's not correct. Right. Why did they encourage her ignorance? Right. And then I started noticing she didn't get yoga right at all. Not at all.
And all that research that she supposedly did, she never researched anything into traditional yoga. Like
the main thing, like Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are probably one of the most bought books in tradition in Eastern philosophy there are, or spirituality there are. Right. And then it's not right.
And it's got nothing to do with Hinduism. That's the great thing about the Yoga Sutras is that you don't have to buy into Hinduism. Hinduism you could separate the Yoga Sutras from Hinduism, but you can't separate Hinduism from. Oh, how does it? Wait, which way does it go?
You can take the yoga out of Hinduism, but you can't take the yoga out of
exactly.
You can take the yoga out of Hinduism, but you can't. No, wait. You can take Hinduism out of yoga, but you can't take yoga out of
Hinduism. Exactly right. Yeah. So the Yoga Sutras could stand on its own. The only connection it really has to Hinduism is Sanskrit.
Is Patanjali was a Hindu. That's it.
Right, exactly. And it's not.
This is where it gets down to the nitty gritty, because as I kept going, I was like, this is entertaining. Like it's gossip. That's all conspiracy theories are. It's gossip, right? Like we're talking about the Illuminati. We're talking about Knights Templar. But I would come out and I'd be like, Todd, how is this spiritual? Right. Like, how is this spiritual? There's nothing. And we would argue about that. And I'd be like, but Todd, all she's doing is she's just dropping into the illusion. And then we started talking about the wave, which really freaked me out when I started reading
and that's something I never knew, that she was claiming to be speaking to herself and that she was the wave, because my recollection was back at the beginning was that the wave was all of us coming from the future to meet ourselves. That's what
you had told me when we
exactly. But hold on, because this is about my experience with being in the quote unquote cult, which I wasn't a full cult member, but I was a little brainwashed by it. But I've got to explain. There's a blank area for me. See, I focused on my attention was focused on the period of time that Frank was involved in the channeling. I haven't read through all the books. Like after I forget, maybe like the fourth, I just sort of tapered off. And so there was a big blank area. I didn't circle back until a handful of years ago when I started getting back on the forum and just reading the most recent transcripts. That's why I missed this important chunk of where Laura was doing the whole not channeling thing and making up her own shit. And that's why I never knew when you brought to my attention about Laura speaking to herself in the future and that she's the wave. That's a load of bullshit. And I didn't know about that. That's why I was so surprised when you brought that to me. I was like, what are you talking about? I've never heard that. That's not the way I understand it. But then you showed me the article. When I read it, I was like, holy shit. I wish that I would have read this years ago because I don't buy into this. That's ridiculous. That's not even where the story came from. I remember when the wave first got brought up. And so, that's due to my lack of like following through all the way to the point where it is now. And so anyway.
Well, and that's what you told me when you started telling me that there's this wave that's coming and it's going to move us into fourth density, blah, blah, blah. And then I started reading it, and there was an article she wrote, and I was reading it with Paula, my business partner, and we got to the end of the article, and I was like, I'm never reading another article again, because she talked about how she's the Messiah.
Right. That
she had a dream where a crown was put on her head, and that she's the Cassiopaeans, she's the holder of the wave.
Right.
So it's not us collectively, it's her, which is service to self. That's a service to self, a pecking order. Anytime you have a Messiah, a prophet, that's all service to self. Service to others, if you read the Law of One, is a collective. It's everybody matters. Every voice matters.
Right.
So, and then I started realizing that Laura comes from a very fundamentalist background, but the wave, what she has done from my perspective is she's created the apocalypse. And instead of the second coming of Jesus, she's made herself the Messiah.
Right.
Yeah. So Laura is the holder. She decides who goes to heaven and who goes to hell.
Yeah. And that was my wake up moment. That was it for me. Once you pointed me to that article, I read that article, I was done. That's all it took for me to completely.
It's gross. It's absolutely. I was so embarrassed reading that article. I was like, this is gross. This is absolutely disgusting. And I cannot believe she even posted this article.
Right. Yeah.
So then you realized you had told me before that there were all these allegations of them being a cult and blah, blah, blah. But then you realized.
No, I said I had recently heard because I had saw something on, I forget where it was. Maybe it was like Reddit or something. Someone had said something about the Cassiopaeans being a cult. And that was my first experience of like, oh, wow, I've never, and this was at the same time you were saying that she thought that she was the wave, that she was talking to herself in the future, that she was the wave. And so this was all coming to a head. Then I saw the cult allegations on, I think it was Reddit. And I was like, whoa, I've never seen that before because I've never really spent much time looking at anything Cassiopaean related other than just the transcripts and the books. And so then I started looking into doing a little research online, Googling some stuff, and I was like, holy shit, what is this? I've never heard this. Because, like I said, I do a lot of my reading in book form. I don't spend a whole lot, if I need to research something, I'll get online and I'll research it, but I would rather sit down with a book. And that's what's got me in trouble here, especially now. If I would have seen a fraction of what I've found today, there's no way I would have ever picked up one of those books. Like, hell fucking no. The shit that I found in the last 5 days.
Oh my God, guys. It's
like I thought I had found a bunch of stuff a few months back. I hit the mother lode that I had no idea that existed. These are people that were on the inside. See, when I had said I'm part of a cult, like I was on the fringes. I realized there are people that have these experiences that were deep in it.
Had their lives ruined.
Yeah, like this is dark. This is
This
even,
one of the most
even after any of you that have watched the videos that I've done and that Bryce and I have done covering Vincent Bridges stuff and Jay Widener, like that's just the very tip of the iceberg here. The very tip. Like they just dealt with like a smear campaign, but there are people that were on the inside, and to hear their stories is so upsetting.
It's heartbreaking.
I can't believe that I turned Bryce onto this, that she turned you all on this, and that we've ended up here. I mean, obviously, it's like sort of my dharma to be exposing this, and so I understand why it was brought forward with good intentions, and now we've had the about face. But
the fact that you decided to go public and take this on because you are related to her as your dharma to expose this.
Right.
The universe opens its doors. We have been in contact with people who've known Laura for a long time. We've had people reach out to us. What Laura doesn't know is that because of my platform, I am able to get this to a big documentary company. So we're working on one for YouTube, and then we're going to hand it over to we want to make something like The Vow on HBO. It's going to be, multi episodes because there's so much stuff here. Yeah. Fraud, attempted murder, worse than Scientology, what she does to people who just happen to question her, say, I don't believe you. And not to mention the fact that after Frank left, Fred, the 8 years they were together, 8 or so years, she went back and literally rewrote the transcripts, majorly changed things.
She changed things. We don't need to get into that. That's beyond. Who cares? Change it, not change it.
Well, she made herself.
That doesn't even.
In the original transcripts, they're like, for Frank Fred is the channel.
Yeah, but just hold on. Don't even get into that because it doesn't matter. The evidence that I've gathered, no one's going to care about who changed the transcripts and who's the original.
Well, I'm saying that because it molds her into the cult leader. Like she knows what she's doing. She's making herself the pretty princess who is the Messiah by changing these to spirit. It's a spiritual manipulation. So that's why I brought that up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, she's rewritten history. She's stolen people's history and just and taken on herself. Like her history, early history of how she came upon channeling Cassiopaeans is completely fabricated. She stole a little bit from Don Elkins. She stole some from Frederick Ireland. She stole some from Vincent Bridges. It's the hodgepodge. And I have early podcasts that she did before she put out her books that she tells a totally different story that contradicts the story that she wrote in her books because she couldn't even keep the story straight. And she hopes that you won't find those, but I found those. They're not. Yeah. Anyway.
She's created websites to take people down. She labels anybody who questions her. She labels them a psychopath, but literally, in my opinion, this is a psychopath.
You're either a psychopath, COINTELPRO, or an OP. Yeah.
But that's what we're looking at in her. Everything she is, she projects on the defactors, which is crazy. So I want to kind of end because Todd, you've got so many episodes coming up that you hit them like you said. By the grace of God, you have met so many people who've been like, here you go, insiders that we're in contact with, all that kind of stuff. But why I wanted to kind of go over again Prakriti and Purusha and why the Cassiopaeans are not spiritual. And the funny thing is we did a video. I'll tag it down below where we did a comparative, the Cassiopaean experiment to the Yoga Sutras, like you do in academics, like comparative religion. Right. And Laura tried to have that video taken down, you guys. LOL. YouTube was like to her. So she tried to privacy strike it because we compared her stuff to actual Yoga Sutras.
Right. So conspiracy theories and the too much focus on conspiracy theories would put you into Prakriti. Mm-hmm. Focusing on the illusion. That's not going to have any bearing on your soul. You can know the truth about every single conspiracy theory that ever existed, and it wouldn't move your soul upon the path of its evolution in the slightest bit.
Nope.
Or
That's what
you
yoga
can
tells you.
focus on information that helps to feed Purusha, which would be moving us out of the illusion and further along our chosen spiritual path. So you could either go with the gossip channeling, which is Prakriti, which is the Cassiopaeans, which is thinking that you have to know something about whatever conspiracy theory you can come up with, and that's of some importance to your soul, which it's absolutely not. And so it's okay that you put a little energy into conspiracy theories. We all like a little bit of drama, okay?
But no, they have their place.
It has its place. Just like zoning out on your phone has its place. Watching some television, sitting in your recliner. It's okay to go a little bit into Prakriti. But
no, that's not going to get your soul to move and go anywhere.
Exactly, right. Yes.
And you're also relying on somebody else like Laura to dictate whether you're a good person or a bad person, or whether you're riding the wave or not, versus in true spirituality, that's up to you. That's up to your soul. Right? Now, we also see one thing that cracks me up about Laura is that there's one thing she does. Well, she does a lot of things that a lot of other cult leaders do. The one thing people don't point out as much, and we see this with like every cult leader, all of her vices, she's made holy for her and sacred for her. Like Joseph Smith had a problem with philandering with women. So all of a sudden he created, polygamy, right? She does, like, she's fat, she's obese. So now her fatness helps deflect the Lizzies. And she doesn't.
Well, that her smoking keeps her from getting eaten by the reptilians or abducted, because they don't want her to stink up their craft or something. I don't know. And that smoking all of a sudden is really good for you.
So why, Todd, when we look at exercise being the foundation of spirituality, like Laura obviously has never done the work because she's obviously never exercised in her life. You can tell.
Well, to be able to be a successful channel, and for channeling to be safe, you have to have a certain amount of control over your prana in your body, to move it and to hold it and just not release it all. And so, as Lewis told us, the one thing that made it possible for us to just get on the board and channel immediately as soon as our hands hit the planchette was because all of the physical work we've done.
20 years, you and I have done 20 years of work.
Right.
We've also been humbled by it.
So going through, comparing, Laura thinks every time she gets some chub rub that it's some like negative attack on her, and that she's like gone through something paranormal. That's not what prepares your soul to be able to channel or to understand the paranormal. It's actually doing the work in your physical body to the point where your soul has a comfortable seat within the body, because your ego takes a hike because
your
of
mind
the
has
intensity of the work. So
and you've been humbled so many times that your ego is not the forerunner.
And
you're wrong.
And it's like my traditional teacher taught us, is that the practice is 97% doing and 1% theory. So, but Laura has this reversed in that 99%. She said she reads all the books she's read, and you're supposed to be impressed with that as though that prepared her spiritually to be able to channel these beings, when it's actually the total opposite. In traditional spirituality, it's 99% of work in the body, and then a little bit of work in studying the philosophy.
The mind's the problem.
Traditionally, it's been in spirituality, and you cannot reverse that. But that's what she's done. She always brags about how much she's read. That's the Prakriti. That's the 1%.
She's pretty dumb too to have read that much. Like, she's pretty dumb.
Well, to have read that much and not to understand the foundation of spiritual practice,
she didn't even know about Hinduism.
Just because the word Prakriti and Purusha is Sanskrit doesn't pigeonhole it into Hinduism.
No, it's just Sanskrit.
It's just another way for saying the matrix or the creator.
Nature, Prakriti is nature, Purusha is the soul.
Right. Yeah.
That's what they translate to. It's Sanskrit. It's a language. And the fact that she thinks it's Hinduism, because multiple cultures spoke Sanskrit, not just Hindus. So that shows how ignorant and low. I think she's kind of actually low IQ. Like, that's just my opinion. I don't think she's that smart because she
Yeah.
says
Well,
really dumb
obviously
shit.
not. Yeah, obviously not. And and it's a little embarrassing for me that I got taken in by this. But hey, very intelligent people get caught in cults, and they all it's
Look
all
at
in
our
good
friend Kelly.
it's all in good
Yeah.
intentions, and everyone has their blind spots. And I obviously
What do
had
they say? Nobody joins a cult, they join a good thing. Well,
right,
I pulled this up because this shows, in case we have any Cassiopaeanists watching this, if you look up bundas, that will explain to you why exercise is also the foundation and why you need it with channeling. You need the lock to hold the energy. And that is only through exercise that you can strengthen the perineum, strengthen the abdominal, the core to hold the energy in the body.
right.
Simple.
And it's not something you have to hold while you're channeling. It's just something
No,
that
it's
happens
just your body just
naturally
gets to that.
through right movement, not right
Yeah.
exercise.
If you have stagnant energy, so if you just sit around and lay around all day, like we live in the South, what happens when water, like a pond, is stagnant? It smells awful. It's
Yeah,
gross.
yeah.
It becomes poisonous.
It
What happens when
harbors dangerous insects like mosquitoes.
what happens when you go to the rapids? It's fresh, it's clean.
Right. It gives oxygen. I can't say the word. It gives
It's been
oxygen
almost 2 hours.
to the water. And so,
So if you're just sitting
that's
around not
weird.
exercising, getting fatter and fatter and fatter and smoking and smoking and smoking, your energy is bunk. Your energy is stagnant. It's gross. It's smelly. It's got poisons.
Yeah.
But when you're moving the energy and you're sweating and you're moving it, it becomes crisp and clean.
That's how you move through karma, as we've been taught.
Mhm.
Is that the way you move through karma is through physically moving your body and exerting your body. You can't just sit there and move through karma.
You can't.
There's no such thing as passive ascension sickness.
You can't think yourself into awakening.
Right.
You have to move into awakening.
You can't read yourself into awakening. You can't think yourself into awakening.
That's the reason why the soul comes into the body, is that movement, that creation.
Right. Whatever happened to the dissolving the ego? And the best way to dissolve the ego is what? Challenging yourself physically.
Running a marathon.
Right. Ego starts going, no, you can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. And eventually it just gives up and like, oh, fuck it. I'm out of here. And then the soul comes in and drops in your body. And that's it. Then you become what they call the Sakshi, if you want to get into a little Sanskrit, the witness. You can't become the witness through reading hundreds, thousands of books.
No.
That's ego. That's feeding your ego. So anyway, we don't need to get into this.
Well, we have a video.
I thank Bryce for waking me up,
saving your ass. No.
Saving my ass. Yeah. I mean, you say I was, and I understand. Like I was in a way part of
it. Was hard,
but I wasn't like what I realized that I wasn't like in the cult, because that's some dark shit. What I've found in the last week, I realized, like, I thought I realized how dark it was.
It got a lot darker.
It got so much darker. And I realized, okay, I was on the periphery. I believed in some things the cult believed in, enough to say, okay, I was a cult member, but I wasn't like a bona fide cult member. Like, yeah.
It gets darker. She's been charged with murder. She's
let's not get it. Let's not go.
Okay, we'll get into that in other videos, guys. There's a lot here. It's a very dangerous cult. My fear, I will end with, is that because Laura keeps saying the wave is going to become before her natural death, obviously, because she's the wave. She's in her 80s now, I think. So, and she smokes like crazy and she's obese. What's to say she's not going to pull a Heaven's Gate and say, well, you have to drink this if you want to catch the wave? This woman's crazy.
Or she could claim that one of her challengers, like Bryce or I, they're holding up the wave.
Yeah.
They could say that too. No, this person needs to go. We take this person out because they're the ones holding up the wave. That's a common tactic.
I've already been told that she's about to put a hit on me, guys.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid. Like and that's actually nothing compared to what she's done to other people. There's a reason why she can't come back to the United States. Yeah. And we're going to get into it. Todd's got everything. It's going to be multiple videos, and we're going to create a very long YouTube documentary. And then we're going to also, it's going to a production company as well. She's not getting away with this. Karma does come around. Vengeance is mine. Lord, I will repay it.
We've paused for a little bit, but now we're getting it back.
Well, the reason why you pause is because you got handed like files of just crimes and crimes and crimes. And it is wild. This woman, I don't think this woman has done anything good in her life. I think her whole life, at the least, in my opinion, she's a con artist.
And to think that there are people out there that believe that she's channeling service to others, 6 density beings.
And look at her behavior. Her behavior is not service to others. It's
Oh my
service.
God. Actually, Bryce and I were talking to Lou about this the other day. If you're familiar with Lou, and we were talking to Lou, I was like, Lou, if we were doing this stuff, fighting and smearing people and lawsuits and this and that, would you still be talking to us? And Lou would be like, hell no, we would have left a long time ago. There's no way that Lou would have continued in conversation, public conversation with us, if we were acting out in the way that Laura is acting out, because service to others would not support that. They'd be like, oh, sorry, see you.
She's service to self through and through. She meets and I don't know if her cult members realize that the vocabulary where she uses, like service to self, service to others, is not hers. Right. Nothing is hers. She's stolen everything. Everything has been stolen.
Well, a way that she excuses that behavior is because she claims that the Cassiopaean said that we're all by nature service to self.
No, we're not. Lou has corrected that, because we can create, we can have babies.
Right. Yeah. Right. And also, our soul creates our DNA. So our DNA cannot be meddled with. That's the other claim, is that our DNA was meddled with by higher density beings, and that's how we ended up. No, it can't be, because that's where the confusion is with Prakriti and Purusha.
No, we can meddle with our own DNA by making choices like this, but as far as like creating the body from the beginning, no, they can't do that because of consent.
Our soul makes our DNA.
Our soul makes it.
Not the reverse.
No, exactly. Yeah. She's not that smart. She's very dumb. There's just so much, guys. And I just, please continue to watch, because this is going to be big. She has done, this is one of I've studied cults like you wouldn't believe. I've had tons of survivors. I have never seen something this dark and this dirty.
And also something that fits so perfect in the structure of what is considered a cult. But just really quick, if you are just coming to this stuff about the Cassiopaean cult right now, as this is your first exposure to it on my channel or Bryce's channel, go back and watch some of the previous episodes we've done exposing this cult, so you can get up to speed, because it's going to be a fascinating ride, I think.
And I want to express to the people that have emailed us, we've gotten a lot of ex-cult members that have reached out, and they're afraid to come on the channel because they're scared of Laura. 100% we understand. Do not feel. Todd and I will take the bullets. We're prepared, and we frankly don't give a shit. If she anytime somebody challenges her, she then all of a sudden has a channeling session with the Cassiopaeans, Cassiopaeans. It's Laura. Laura hasn't channeled shit. It's her making it up, where they make up stories. And if that happens, guys, we're going to read about our own channeling on our program.
Or whatever smear articles that she comes up with, anything that comes out by them trying to smear us, we're just going to cover
on our show.
We've got nothing to hide.
There's nothing that we have to hide. So anything that would come out would be made up anyway, would be completely made up. Right. And so we'll read it and we'll show you where it's made up. So she's not going to get away with it. She's not. She's dealing with 2 wanderers, and she's barely a soul. So she's not going to get away with it. She's not channeling. You can't hurt people like this and get away with it.
Nope.
I'm actually surprised she has gotten herself out of prison so many times, you guys. It's amazing that she's gotten herself out of having to actually serve time. So, and this is her cousin. So her cousin's going to take her down. So, and free people. Please do not drink anything she gives you. Study Heaven's Gate. We don't want that situation. Your life matters. The value. If any cult members are watching right now, your value as a human being does not matter. Laura Knight has no say in your value as a human being. You are a fractal of God, and what she does, the outcome of this life is not determined by her. And we will be a listening ear. We'll lend support wherever we can. We do have connections in France, so if you need help getting out of her little compound in France, reach out to us. We'll see what we can do. We know somebody pretty high up in France, actually. He lives in the United States, but we can potentially help you.
No.
So you're not alone. you have support. So God loves you. Everything's fine. Just put some walk. If you want to have a spiritual experience, go to an exercise class.
Right.
Easy as that. So, all right, you guys. Well, if you want to join us at Fusion Body, discount code is in the description box below. And all of Todd's links are down below too. Anything else before we sign out, Todd?
That's it. I think about covers everything.
Ask any questions below, you guys, and be on the lookout, especially on Todd's channel, for way more juicy, scandalous stuff to come out. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thanks for joining us. Bye.